Hello folks, this is Kenneth. This is a 94 Honda Civic. It's the Civic EX. It's got the VTEC 1.6 in it. It's got 131,000 miles. The way you can tell it's a VTEC is some numbers where your dipstick is. There's some numbers down there, but you can't see them. And you have to get those numbers and look it up. About 6 months ago, I've had this car for a little over a year. The idle was running about 400 RPMs, and I tried to adjust it. So I turned this screw right here counterclockwise, and it didn't do a thing for me. So I drove it like that, low RPMs. But on the cold idle, it was running about 2,000 when you started it up cold, and it was just idling too fast. So I just lived with it, but about 3 days ago I got my mechanic to put a timing belt on it and a water pump and the idler belt tensioner pulley, and he did all that for me. And while he was working on that, there is a cold thermal valve located right in here. Right there's your idle screw, and right down below it on the right hand side, sort of right under it, is a cold idle thermal valve. It's got antifreeze hose running to it, and I think one on the other side that runs out somewhere. But anyway, there's a little round plastic donut on the other side. It's got 2 slots in it. And I got him to run it in right-handed. For some reason, those things wear out. And after so many thousand miles, 100,000, you have to turn them right-handed. It's got 2 slots in it, little plastic donut. And in the center of it, it sucks air. When the engine's cold, that makes it suck air and raises the idle. Well, when the engine heats up, the antifreeze heats that up, and then it closes that valve, and the idle goes back down. Well, I got him to adjust that. He took it off, and he ran it right-handed until it bottomed out, then he stopped. He put the cover back over it and then mounted it back on the engine. Well, that was like 2 days ago. Well, the idle started running at 1,000 RPMs when it was warmed up, where it used to run at 400. Okay. When I started and when it's cold, it was idling at 1,500, and then just in a minute or two, it would just drop down to 1,000 RPMs, which is too fast. Well, I reset the computer by taking the hot off for a minute or two, and that resets the computer. And then I put it back on, and I drove it for about 10 miles, and the engine started idling up and down, up and down. And so I drove it another 10. I drove it about 23 miles, and I come home and parked it, and it was still idling up and down and up and down. And I thought, well, what's went wrong? So I remembered that 6 months ago, I adjusted the idle on it, which was this screw here, and I remember it didn't do anything. So I got to thinking about it, and I thought there was air trapped in this thermal valve, and that'd cause it to do that. But the hoses were hot, so I remembered I adjusted the idle on it 6 months ago. I turned it left to give it more air, and it didn't help. So anyway, to make a short story out of it, while it was loping up and down, about 1,000 RPMs, I come out here and turned it to the right, which would be clockwise, and the idle immediately went down to around 700. So the idle on these 94s is supposed to be between 650 and 750 RPMs. So anyway, it's running around 700, right around 700 RPMs. But there's a lesson here that idle screw right here, and this one is flush. You can't hardly get to it with a screwdriver. It's got a thin slot. That's not made for me and you to adjust. A mechanic told me one time, years ago, that the idle screw on these modern cars is for the technician. If you adjust the idle on these cars, the computer tries to compensate. If you adjust the idle too low, usually the computer will compensate for that and it'll be okay. But if you adjust the idle too high, 200 or 300 RPMs higher than it should be, the computer is constantly fighting the idle, and it will go up and down, up and down. So if you have an idle problem, and yours is idling up and down, first, take this cold thermal valve off for your cold idle. Take that little round donut, turn it right-handed till it stops, and then quit. Put the cover back on it. Sometimes you can do it while they're on the car, sometimes you can't. And then come over, then check your idle after it warms up. And if your idle is too fast, turn your screw to the right, get your idle down to about 650, 700, and that should fix it. Somebody before you may have turned the idle on that car. And so, folks, I hope this video helped. I know YouTube has helped me out a lot on this stuff. Thanks. Like I said, my name's Kenneth, and I'm just learning from experience, and that's all. Thanks a lot for watching my video. See you next time.